Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The Irish Prime Minister says time is running out to achieve the best outcome for Northern Ireland and the Republic after Brexit. Leo Varadkar's been speaking in Belfast for the first time since taking office.
And I think we found south of the border over the past few decades that the kind of freedom that some people thought was impossible has been achieved through the international symphony of our membership of the European Union. So I passionately believe that being European is an essential part of modern Irish identity. It's an enhancement, not a dilution of who we are. And in my opinion, it's a tragedy of the Brexit debate that appears that this common European identity is not valued by everyone on these islands. The Ulster poet John Hewitt famously spoke of his multiple identities as an Ulster man of planter stock, as Irish, as British, and as European. And he believed we all had multiple identities, and that's what made us who we are. That it's a strength, not a weakness, an opportunity, not a threat, and it's something we should embrace about ourselves and about others, rather than something that we should see as an impurity or a basis for exclusion. And I think that philosophy is at the very heart of the Good Friday Agreement, the right of the people of Northern Ireland to be British or Irish or both, and with it, of course, the right to be European. And after Brexit, those rights remain, making this part of Ireland and this part of the United Kingdom truly unique, and one that will need unique solutions if we are to preserve all that has been gained. For too long, we've allowed competing identities and competing cultures and even competing histories to be used to define ourselves and define our neighbours. And to this very day, people continue to mark out the narrow ground, to cling to what Churchill memorably described a century ago as the integrity of our quarrel. We should also remember that Churchill believed we needed to walk together in mutual comprehension. And in this spirit, only a few weeks ago, my forebears Taoiseach and Kenny stood side by side at the site of the Battle of Messines with the Duke of Cambridge, the leader of the DUP, and a former Sinn Féin mayor of this city, and with representatives of all strands of opinion on this island. And that moment of solemn contemplation and mutual respect proved how much things have changed for the better in the past 20 years. And if the challenge of the First World War was the challenge of that generation, I think perhaps the challenge for our generation is Brexit. The Brexit negotiations are now well underway in Brussels, and to quote Michel Barnier, the clock is now ticking. Every single aspect of life in Northern Ireland could be affected by the outcome. Your jobs and your economy, the border, the rights of EU citizens, the rights of cross-border workers, research funding, as was mentioned earlier, trade, agriculture, energy, our fisheries, aviation, EU funding, tourism, public services, the list goes on. And in October, and it's not that far away, I'll sit around the European Council table in Brussels with 26 other Prime Ministers and Presidents, and we will decide together whether sufficient progress has been made on the three key issues to allow the Brexit negotiations to proceed to the next phase. Those key issues, as you know, citizens' rights, the financial settlement between the UK and the European Union, and specific issues relating to Ireland. And it's going to be a historic meeting for this island. And it is my fervent hope that progress will have been made by then, but I do not underestimate for a second the enormity of the challenges that we face. For our part, the Irish Government will discharge our responsibilities as co-guarantors of the Good Friday Agreement. We will do all that we can in Brussels, in London and in Dublin to achieve the best outcome for everyone on this island, to protect our peace, our freedoms, our rights and our prosperity. And I will talk, as I have in recent weeks, to the First Ministers in Scotland and Wales, two people with whom I share a common view, a view which favours the United Kingdom remaining in the single market and the customs union. Today, we need an answer to a very simple question. Who do I who do we in Europe speak to when we want to speak to Belfast? Who will speak for Northern Ireland and her 1.8 million people? Time is running out, and I fear no extra time will be allowed.
It is, I think, beholden upon us to discuss the Irish question. God, depending on what decade we're in, that could mean any one of half a dozen things, couldn't it? But today, of course, it is, like so much else, related to Brexit. I confided in you half an hour ago, I don't really know how to conduct these debates anymore because we've gone so far down the rabbit hole. We're so post-truth, post-reality that the Irish Prime Minister can make a speech describing the imminent dangers that we're facing and the almost unbelievable absence of clarity that we still have in this country, and he's just stating facts. But if you need to turn it into a debate or a discussion in a studio or on the radio, you've got to invite someone in to say it's not reality, it's not facts. I have a much better understanding of the political landscape in Ireland than the Irish Prime Minister does, because here you go, Alan, here you go. Overeducated, brainwashed, anti-UK snobs who can't see past their Europhile noses. Thank you, Alan. It's almost as if it was scripted. How can you be overeducated, man? How can you have too much knowledge? How can you have too much knowledge, too much education? But that's what I mean. So, no offence to you, Alan. I'm sure you wouldn't claim to have a better understanding of Irish politics than the Irish Prime Minister, but there are plenty of people who will. And when you're presenting a programme, sometimes when I work elsewhere, like at the Beeb, I'd have to invite them in. You've got to invite, here's someone who thinks they have a better understanding of Irish politics than the Irish Prime Minister. And what do you think? I think fish and blue passports, marvellous. You know, Michael Gover said the fish are off the table. Oh, all right, blue passports then. And even though I'm doing it, I've already fallen into the trap. This kind of weird dichotomy, this polarity of evidence-based discussion and perfectly decent people who are faith-based in their outlook rather than evidence-based. So here's what I would like to do. And it's a little bit different, and it might not work, because although we are a national radio station, I don't think you can... Can you get us in the Republic on DAB? I'm not sure you can. That's not a problem, though, because Britain and Ireland have such a historic, have such a history of interplay, such a history of migration between the two countries, particularly from Ireland to Britain, that there'll be plenty of people listening to this programme right now who are qualified to answer this. And then I want to extend that invitation to people in Northern Ireland or from Northern Ireland as well. I want to know what people are saying about this in Ireland and Northern Ireland, because all I hear really is England. Recently, we've cracked some eggs in Scotland. It's been wonderful to get so many Scottish callers. It's made us realise perhaps how little time in Westminster is spent contemplating scenarios in Holyrood. You get that kind of weird, almost a cultural chasm. And then when Theresa May found £1 billion for the DUP, we actually realised how little time we spent contemplating Northern Irish politics, because that shone a spotlight briefly on Stormont. And a lot of us on the mainland were very surprised by what we saw. The prospect of a referendum on a united Ireland was raised yesterday by one senior Irish politician. Now, I feel, I should throw some opinions out there, although I stress I'm not as well qualified in this field as you are, if you are Irish or Northern Irish. I think the likelihood of a united Ireland grows bigger every day. As a kid, I naively thought that was a good thing. I didn't really understand the interplay of history, and I certainly didn't understand terrorism until I was a bit older, but it just seemed to me to be a historical anomaly that an invading force retained sovereignty in a corner of a country, the rest of which has achieved independence. Now, it seems to me that if Irish unification comes about as a result of Brexit, it will be bonkers, because nobody who voted for Brexit necessarily wanted Irish reunification, and nobody who wanted Irish reunification necessarily would consider Brexit to be a price worth paying for it. It's such an emblematic issue of how unprecedented and how nuts everything has become. But what I realised today, oddly enough, I was driven to work this morning by a Northern Irish fella who'd been back to the old country last week with 3 English lads and his own son, and he was describing to me their surprise at the border. You know, the way you can just hop over down to Athlone or somewhere like that without really even having to do anything at all. This absolute ease of egress and ingress, which 20 years ago, before the Good Friday Agreement, these were checkpoints. These were military checkpoints. So that very simple question of what's going to be there is yet another example of something that we should have been given absolutely clear guidance on before we were allowed to cast votes. I mean, I used it as a bit of a of a baseball bat, actually. Sometimes I just say to people, what's going to be the situation with the Irish border?
And in looking to the future, I believe we must look upon this island with fresh eyes and consider what it means to all of us. I was born in 1979, the same year that Lord Mountbatten was brutally murdered by the IRA, and a decade after the Troubles began. It was also the year in which a woman was appointed to the cabinet in the Republic of Ireland for the first time since the foundation of the state, and was the year of the famous papal visit. But the Pope couldn't travel north. He had to make his plea for peace, from south of the border. Back then, south of the border, Ireland was a very different place, a very different country to the one it is today. Confessional, inward-looking, and underdeveloped economically by Western European standards. And the border itself was a very different place. A place of bloodshed, of violence, of checkpoints, a barrier to trade, prosperity, peace, and freedom. A brutal physical manifestation of the historic divisions on our island and our political failure. The first time I was eligible to vote was in the referendum to ratify the Good Friday Agreement. The vast majority of people on both sides of the island voted for a new future based on power sharing, equality, mutual respect and cooperation, north and south and east and west. History can often move slowly, but then things change all of a sudden. And I have only a limited recollection of the border and the Troubles, but I know that, like nearly everyone in this audience and on this island, we don't want to go back to that. So much in the past 20 years has changed for the better, and we need to hang on to that. The Republic of Ireland has changed to the point where it's now a country that is built on respect and equality before the law for all citizens, no matter what their beliefs or identity may be. It's a country that's now home to 800,000 people who weren't born in Ireland, making up 17% of our population. It's the first country in the world to vote by a national referendum to introduce marriage equality and enshrine that in our constitution. And we now have a new self-confidence as an island not on the edge of Europe, but at the centre of the world and at the heart of a common European home that we helped to build. A founder member of the Euro and the single market, we have taken our place, finally, among the nations of the world. Your Pro-Chancellor, Professor English, has written that the concept of freedom has been a recurring melody in nationalist symphony. And I think we found, south of the border, over the past few decades, that the kind of freedom that some people thought was impossible has been achieved through the internationalist symphony of our membership of the European Union. So I passionately believe that being European is an essential part of modern Irish identity. It's an enhancement, not a dilution of who we are. And in my opinion, it's a tragedy of the Brexit debate that appears that this common European identity is not valued by everyone on these islands.
Oh, you don't need to worry about that. I think we do need to worry about that. I really do. The amount of blood that has been spilt over that border is almost like immeasurable. And now we seem to be in the best place in living memory with regard to that line in the sand between the north and the south of Ireland. And what are we going to replace it with? We don't know. The Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, has essentially listed all of the areas of uncertainty that very few politicians in this country are even acknowledging at the moment. Jeremy Corbyn isn't. Theresa May isn't. So if you're listening in Cork, I said that because someone's just rung from Cork, I can see on the switchboard, or Waterford or Athlone, wherever it may be, or if you're listening in the north, I want you just to tell me, what conversations are you having about Brexit? Can I get away with that? Because that is really interesting to me. I know what conversations we're having, and they've become increasingly fractious and increasingly unpleasant, and I'm happy to take some responsibility for that. Nobody likes to be made to feel stupid, especially if it's true. But the conversations that you're having in Ireland are going to be of interest to the rest of us. At least I think they are. And part of the reason I think so is because this speech that Leo Varadkar has just given is so explicit.
Your jobs and your economy, the border, the rights of EU citizens, the rights of cross-border workers, research funding, trade, agriculture, energy, our fisheries, aviation, EU funding, tourism, public services, the list goes on.
It does. It goes on. He didn't have to end there, but I'm going to play it again anyway, because this is just some of the stuff that it has taken the Irish Prime Minister to point out. The British Prime Minister has not offered us a crumb of certainty on.
Your jobs and your economy, the border, the rights of EU citizens, the rights of cross-border workers, research funding, trade, agriculture, energy, our fisheries, aviation, EU funding, tourism, public services, the list goes on.
The list goes on. You can't provide certainty, of course. I misspoke there, but clarity on what is wanted is all that you'd like. What are we actually going to seek? What would winning look like? What would success look like? What would a strategy, a negotiating strategy look like? All right, I'm going to do it one more time, because to me, this is one of those moments where pennies should be dropping up and down the land. You just hear the Irish Prime Minister describe the chaos that we're inflicting upon ourselves and how it looks from the outside. But of course, the only way we have a debate about this in Britain now, because of somehow the media has been boxed into this weird track, would be to invite people on to say, no, it's not chaos at all. Because nobody can say, I know the answers to these questions.
Your jobs and your economy, the border, the rights of EU citizens, the rights of cross-border workers, research funding, trade, agriculture, energy, our fisheries, aviation, EU funding, tourism, public services, the list goes on.
And the snake oil salesmen have been silent on all of these issues. Jeremy Corbyn has said absolutely nothing about Ireland, as far as I'm aware. Theresa May has said next to nothing. So, what is the conversation in Irish families? What is the conversation in Ireland itself, or indeed in this country, being conducted within families that are still linked to the old country? And it puts me in mind of that poor woman we heard from earlier in the week, the Finnish woman whose in-laws have gone from the morning after the vote saying, so no, we didn't mean you when we voted to leave, and then moving on to, well, when are you going then? Because you can't keep defending that position indefinitely. You might not have meant me, but you hit me. What's going on in Ireland? Derek is in Cork, which is appropriate enough. Derek, what would you like to say?
Hello, thank you. And first of all, I enjoy listening to you.
Thank you, Derek.
Yeah, okay, a little nervous. I've spoken to your colleagues a few times in the night, so... But anyway...
I'm not nice, I'm bad cop, but I think we'll be all right.
The night.
Oh, the night, okay. So just give me an overview then of the kind of conversations, or the perspective, or just your own. How does Brexit look from Cork?
I think you're mad.
Oh.
Mad. Crazy, to be honest.
Me or Britain?
Britain.
Oh, thank
British
goodness.
people.
Yes.
No, that's why I like listening to you. Whereas your colleague, Nick Ferrari,
you can't...
I enjoy listening to him, but he's very...
Well, don't do that. I don't come round your office and start... You can criticise the liar Farage as much as you want, but everybody else is a decent, respectable journalist who don't lie to you on a regular basis, okay?
Okay.
Carry on.
But, I've lived in Czech Republic for a while, for 4 years, and I lived in Slovakia. So I'm very pro-Europe. I can hear myself talking. It's very annoying, actually. There's an echo. But that's, to be honest,
Why? Listen, tell people listening to this programme now why you think they're mad for doing this or wanting this.
Why do something that you don't know what's ahead?
Well, no, that's not good enough. There's lots of you'd never do anything. No one can read in the future. You don't have a crystal ball.
Yes, but I always said before that the people who voted have still the British Empire mentality, that they're better alone, and especially Nigel Farage.
Well, they don't. Again, I mean, he's a slightly exceptional circumstance, but a lot of people who voted to leave are the opposite of that. They're saying they want to do trade with the rest of the world. Just give me a sentence on why you think, because you said mad about 6 times. I just want you to put some flesh on that particular bone.
Okay. It's just, to be honest, Britain have been doing well in the European Union, and you have a voice. Because you are the 5th, I keep on hearing, the 5th largest economy in the world. And I think that that's the reason I think that it's just crazy.
So
to be on your own.
jeopardize is the word that I'm hearing in the background as you speak. Why would you jeopardize what you already had? To which the answer, I have to tell you, is an awful lot of people felt they didn't have anything. They didn't have anything to lose, particularly when you move into the poorer areas of the country where the vote to leave was huge. And I'm not the man to tell them they were wrong. If they honestly had been reduced to a position where they felt they had nothing to lose, my advice would be, if you think you've got nothing to lose, don't put your trust in the hands of any politicians who seem to lead towards extreme right-wing views, because historically they don't generally put the poor at the top of the list. But in terms of jeopardising something, it might look from Ireland like we're jeopardising something, but if you're skint and living in the middle of a really run-down area, some of the poorest areas in the European Union are in the United Kingdom, what have they got to lose? OK, Derek, you kick us off nicely. I want Irish perspectives on Brexit. After the Prime Minister has said that he doesn't want an economic border between Britain and Ireland, how would a Brexiter respond to the suggestion that we should just have an open border with the European Union? A completely open land border. So you can just land in Dublin, hop on a bus, wherever you're from, anywhere in the European Union, Schengen or otherwise, and you can still get into Britain without any checks whatsoever. And this, of course, is a conversation that unfolds against the backdrop of checks being introduced in European airports, and the key Brexit cheerleaders in the newsagents are absolutely furious about it. I've already done that this week. I can't even... It starts off as satire, ends up as policy. There's a government minister on the front of the Telegraph today claiming that we should have special lanes. I did that as a comedy routine on Monday. How do you think tighter border controls are going to be affected without tightening borders? Oh, I don't know. I think we should have special lanes for blue passports. And then today, 4 days later, it's on the front of the Daily Telegraph. So how does all that look from Ireland? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. If you hit the numbers now, you will get through. It's 12:17. What's going on in Ireland? How do you solve a problem like the border in the context of Brexit? The sad truth is, nobody knows. The tragedy, and I think the unforgivable element of this whole conversation, is that clarity has not been provided. So the fundamental, historians of the future come to work out why the referendum created such chaos. And I, for one, hope it isn't indefinite. Let's make that absolutely clear. I was praying yesterday that there might be some truth in the European Union theory that we're pretending to be utterly ill-prepared, chaotic and divided, that our cabinet and our negotiating team are secretly assembling a superb platform of proposals and policies, because the European Union negotiators actually can't believe their eyes. And you get a similar sense from Ireland, from Derek, the caller a moment ago. But it's not inevitable. It didn't have to be like this. This isn't me sort of doing some reverse ferret and trying to make friends with leavers. This is me simply saying that we don't know now whether or not it could have been done in a better way. We just know that it hasn't been. I think it almost certainly could have been done in a better way. Clarity from the start, a pledge to the 3.2 million the day after the referendum result came in, that the terms and conditions of their residence in this country would go unchanged. All of this should have been done, but they just sat on their hands for ages. And now you're left with a March 29 deadline approaching ever closer and a complete absence of clarity. And the intervention of Leo Varadkar this morning is fascinating, because it's both close and far. Ireland is both British and not British, if you see what I mean. It's always felt like part of our country. It's not just me as an O'Brien saying that. It doesn't feel like France or Ulaanbaatar, Ireland. You know, everyone, and then Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. It's so close, and yet it's still not. And this is how we look from where he is. That's what I'm interested in. How do we look from Belfast? How do we look from Cork? How do we look from Galway? How do we look from Ulster? How do we look from Derry? Or indeed from Londonderry? Mark's in Belfast. Mark, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I was listening to the conversation with great interest, and I think one of the things that's been missed in the whole conversation is the little perspective that people from Northern Ireland have on this, and it's good that you're discussing it here on the radio. I mean, my job relies on me travelling between Belfast and Dublin. It's fantastic. I can leave the city in the north, be in Dublin, in an hour and a half. It's opened up a whole new a workplace and for me in that
just give people an idea of what it would have been like previously, prior to the Good Friday Agreement, what that journey would have involved. Would you have been able to have worked freely on the other side of the border?
Well, because there were checkpoints, you would have physically had to stop at the border. There would have been checks depending on whether they thought you were of interest. Nowadays it's seamless. I mean, you travel, there are toll roads and you just drive straight through. It makes stuff very, very easy. It makes business very easy. I don't know what the future is going to hold, because all of a sudden we have uncertainty.
Yes.
The border is porous. There's no point in pretending that you're going to be able to stop people coming across it. It's a leaky border. People from the European Union will simply move into the north. And the only way that, I've given this a little bit of thought, and I honestly think the only workable way, which was proposed, is that the border will shift to the ports coming in and out of Ireland, and I think,
and that would be unification in all but name.
In all but name. And I think what the British government, if they're keen to retain Northern Ireland as part of the United Kingdom, I think the only workable way to do it will accept that there will be people moving across, and they will, just like in the old days when we travelled to the UK mainland, we went through passport control, and I think that will be the sacrifice that the UK government makes.
Well, they won't be sacrificing anything themselves. They'll be sacrificing the freedom and the full citizenship, in a sense, of British Northern Ireland residents.
Yeah, and
they'll be second class when they arrive at British airport, at mainland airports, at mainland ports. They'll be second class because they'll have to go through customs checks to come from one part of their country to another part of their country. So people who say we've got our country back, arguably, are either going to create a country that is more divided than it's ever been because of what we've just described, or they're going to give away the part of this country over which more blood has been spilt than any other.
Yeah, no, I agree, but it is the only workable way to do it, because you simply, I've listened to discussions saying, well, we'll check people across the border. There are the main motorways that go across, but everybody knows that if you're wanting to enter the United Kingdom from the European Union, if we and when we remove ourselves from the from the European Union, you'll simply go down one of the minor roads.
Yes, of course you will. This is so obvious now, isn't it? Now that it's coming into focus, it's remarkable that it's been ducked so far, and that partly explains the Taoiseach's not confusion, but his comments today about just the completely abject absence of any form of clarity on a whole heap of issues, at the top of which comes the border. It's amazing. 2019, we leave.
Yeah, it really is scary, and you're talking to someone who was a Remainer, but at the same time, I personally want clarity on the direction of where we're going, and just so that you can plan for the future. If it means longer delays, if it means that you're going to be at the border for,
you'll have to think about changing your job or moving house, won't you?
Yeah,
and you might not be able to move house because you're not going to have freedom of movement into Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland is not going to be part of the European Union anymore, or rather, you're not going to be able to move freely into the European Union, which is where your job is at the moment.
And what is happening at the minute is that all the Northern Ireland citizens are applying for Irish passports.
So I'm reading.
Because they want to remain part of the EU, to have that ability to move freely. And that's a massive mind shift for a lot of people who saw themselves as British and saw themselves as Northern Irish British, but are open now to the idea of an Irish passport and being Irish citizens.
It's an incredible mindset that would not have been able to, would never have unfolded if the religion still had a vice-like grip upon the country. I think the slight diminishment, or the large diminishment of these religious loyalties is part of what's going on in Northern Ireland, isn't it?
Yeah. But one of the things that I've noticed over the last 5 years is actually how much of the UK has an influence in Ireland. Every time you stay in hotels in the Republic of Ireland, you'll see Sky News, you'll see
yes.
British News, and there's actually more that unites the Irish and the British. There are actually more similarities in the British Isles as a whole than there are in the increasing divisions within Europe. And I think it's, it would be a shame that it would be a shame for Ireland and the United Kingdom to fall out over that.
Well, as if Ireland has to pick a side. It does feel as if Ireland has to pick a side, doesn't it, in a way?
It's being forced to pick a side. At the minute, it's going to have to go down. It's going to have to choose the European Union. It's done so well over the last 20 years with all the European funding. But there's definitely, we speak our first language is well, the Republic of Ireland would say their first language is Irish, but the working language is English.
Yes, of course.
And so much business is done between the two countries that there needs to be more of an engagement with the Republic of Ireland and see them as our friends, because they are our
well, that's the silver lining. That's the silver lining of sorts, until you recognise, as Gordon puts it, the only solution to the Irish question, which answers all of your questions, is a united Ireland. I suppose Brexiteers think that the end of the United Kingdom is a price worth paying for getting their country back. And that's grim. If you disagree with that, then explain why. But I don't know how you can disagree with that. Everybody on that side of the Irish Sea is describing a very, very similar picture. It's coming up to 12:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Mark, thank you very much indeed. I genuinely hope, as I hope for everybody, whatever their politics, that your life is not more complicated than it needs to be in the coming months and years. But it's an increasingly forlorn hope. I like this idea. I hesitate to ring it out because Caroline likes nothing more than getting on the road and getting out of the studio. Thank you, James, and your producers for raising this issue. I live right on the border in the north, and you really won't understand the effect Brexit is going to have until you come here and see for yourself. The programme you did from Grenfell Tower was incredibly powerful. Could you possibly think about doing one from here in Derry? I could help out, point you... Oh, bless you, Angie. I could point you in the right direction for people to talk to, etc. I'd even do it for free. It would just be such a huge contribution to the debate. We feel like nobody in Great Britain is listening or understanding. Please think about this. I will. It's 12:30. What was it in? Was it about 60-40 in Northern Ireland to remain? So you've still got 40% of the voting population there who want to leave. I'd love to know whether they've got any clear idea of what's going to happen, because the Irish Prime Minister hasn't. The Home Office, it was reported last week, has admitted it hasn't consulted any external experts on the effect of Brexit on the Irish border. That's just incredible. It's one of the three key points of negotiation, isn't it? You've got movement of people, the divorce settlement, and the Irish border. Those are the top three. And the Home Office, I don't know if was it a Freedom of Information request? It was reported in the Irish Times last week. It didn't get picked up that much on the mainland of the United Kingdom, but they haven't had any consultation on it at all. So this is the first public consultation on the Irish-British border post-Brexit, right here now, live on LBC. This is the first public consultation that's ever happened. So I better come up with a slightly more sophisticated question. Then what do you think's going on? Ian's in Omagh. Ian, what do you think's going on?
Hi, James.
Hello, Ian.
I'm ringing you from Omagh.
Good man.
I live in Belfast. I've just had a meeting with a business client, and we've been discussing Brexit.
Gosh.
I don't know where to begin, mate. I've described myself in the past year as an emotional unionist, so I come from that sort of background.
Sure.
But I'm listening to Leo. I like the cut of his jib as well, the Irish Prime Minister. And, it's a pity that we're waiting on him to tell us what our own leaders should be discussing.
Is that how it feels as a Northern Irishman? Because from this side of the sea, it's easy for me to say, why is he doing it? Why aren't our lot doing it? But you are one of the chips in this game, and you feel that the other side, as it were, are representing your interests, your position better than your own side.
Yeah, the DUP are more concerned about bonfires and rubbish like that. But no, Leo speaks really well, and I mean the issues he raised are all pertinent. The things that I discussed with my client today were exports, food industry in Ireland is going to be really, really under pressure. Logistics, moving stuff onto the continent. Most of it goes to the UK. There's no chance of having an enforceable border on this island. It must go.
Well, you say that. You've had one before. You don't need me to remind you of that.
We didn't. We had 14,000 soldiers on the border who still couldn't enforce it.
Yeah, well, that's true.
I mean, really. And people don't want that back either. So the border will move to the ports, and I think that the UK government doesn't really care an awful lot about us. They're buying the DUP votes, that's okay, but they don't really care and haven't given any real thought to it. I mean, I saw a photograph of Michel Barnier and his colleagues across the table from David Davis. The EU team had a full brief full of papers. Now, it could have been nothing on them. But
yes, of course.
So.
No, I saw the picture as well. I don't want to put too much weight on it. They could have had a huge load of papers under the table or in a briefcase in the atrium.
It reflects what a lot of us think is going on. The UK government don't seem prepared. They seem split on the issue. They seem out to get Philip Hammond out of his...
He seems to be next, doesn't he?
Yeah. So what is going to happen? We don't know. We're very concerned. It's allowing a lot of people here to question their... I think your previous caller talked about the Irish passports issue.
Yes.
And people being more comfortable. And, you know, you said a lot of blood has been spilled over that place. That is correct. But the way things are moving, the North will be pushed out of the UK and into United Ireland. And you know what? A lot of people won't be that unhappy about it.
Are you surprised to hear those words coming out of your own mouth in 2017?
Yeah, a wee bit. But the Irish Republic is becoming a modern, progressive, pluralist society with open links to trading partners across the world and in Europe, and fairly more enlightened attitudes. And, well, what's happening in the mainland, as we used to call it, I don't know.
Doesn't seem to deserve the description that you've just employed. English nationalism. It's not even that. It's possibly even more bovine than Englishness.
I just think people have voted to make themselves poor, and let alone all the issues that it creates for us over here. It just seems an incredibly bad decision.
I should probably wait for one to ring me. But what would be the position of the pro-Leave Northern Irishman or woman?
That is the DUP. I think most of the other parties were pro-Remain, although maybe lightly so. The Leavers, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense, the DUP position, because it does put the border under pressure if we have a land border with a EU country. I just don't think they thought it through.
Well, that's not unique to Northern Ireland. I mean, the struggle on this particular question, and in my opinion, on many others as well, but for the purposes of today's discussion, on this particular question, I don't think anybody has thought it through. Not from that side of the debate. Anybody on the other side, the Remain side of the debate, has thought it through and concluded that it's an almighty blinking mess. Utterly, utterly chaotic. The other side can't really agree with that analysis because they caused it. I think that's part of the problem. So what else can you do? There's no debate. Here is some chaos. I'm sorry, I'm not joining in this conversation because I created the chaos and I don't really have the stones anymore to deny that it's chaos, because it walks like chaos, it looks like chaos, it quacks like chaos, it is chaos. Just play the list again, because Ian provided his own. Just remember, this is a fella, Ian, thank you so much. Ian Omar, just come out of a business meeting discussing the impacts of a business meeting. That's his livelihood, that's food on the table stuff. And this is the Prime Minister of Ireland, a country which Ian has grown up not seeing as the enemy, obviously, but seeing the union with Britain, the union with the rest of Great Britain as being part of his political makeup. And now he's listening to this fella and thinking he speaks more for him than the British Prime Minister.
Every single aspect of life in Northern Ireland could be affected by the outcome. Your jobs and your economy, the border, the rights of EU citizens, the rights of cross-border workers, research funding, as was mentioned earlier, trade, agriculture, energy, our fisheries, aviation, EU funding, tourism, public services, the list goes on.
The list goes on. Ben's in Bangor, also in Northern Ireland. Ben, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I can't believe we've got so many listeners over there. It's fantastic news. Carry on.
Absolutely. Look, I am one of a growing number of people in Northern Ireland who is beginning to consider themselves more of a European unionist than anything else.
Gosh.
I have both an Irish passport and a British passport, and I wholeheartedly believe that the only thing that we can do in Northern Ireland is come up with some sort of special, some sort of unique circumstance to have an associate membership, to have the European Union coming up with an idea that keeps Northern Ireland in the EU but keeps it part of the United Kingdom. And if you keep it part of the United Kingdom, you have, of course, you satisfy the unionists here who voted to leave. And with regard to where the border goes, you have it in your ports, but you create a separate line that has unionists that allows British and Irish passport holders to go through, and on the other side you have an EU line. So I think what we need to do here is create an associate membership for Northern Ireland. We can't forget, as Northern Irish citizens, the amount of money that was pumped in.
Is that even a thing? Is that even a thing?
It is totally...
But the will of the people, the will of the people.
Oh, but the EU is brilliant at coming up with things, you know. I mean, look at Cyprus, where half of the country considers itself Turkish. Some
yeah, but I don't think the EU doesn't recognise that, does it, at this point in history?
Well, the Turkish who hold dual nationality have the right to vote in the EU elections.
Okay.
So what I think...
But hang on a minute, I want associate membership. Why do you get it in Bangor and we don't get it in Birmingham?
Well, absolutely. I totally understand that. Now, this is where the important point is that the EU, since 1996, has given about €2 billion to Northern Ireland in terms of in the peace process to keep the peace between us. We must realise here that, I mean, everyone realises in the United Kingdom and Ireland that we are in a very unique situation, that we cannot see a return to a hard border. And this is really the only way. And you know, we, whether we like to admit it or not, we need this peace process. We need the peace funding that the EU gives us, and I think the continuation of that, no one can disagree with.
Do you know what you've just done? You've just clarified for me the meaning of the word supranational, because language is so important here. You could, if you were so minded, and plenty of people still are, you could now say, in response to the points that you make, Ben, yeah, but that was our money in the first place. It's all very well saying the EU gave us £2 billion. We paid in that £2 billion. In the first place, so it was our money to spend. But the point here is that the EU is a supranational organisation that has spent money to foster peace in two parts of the European Union. They just happen to be Ireland and Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland just happens to be part of Britain. But they have spent money on keeping the peace in two parts of the European Union. And that, to me, seems to be the most simple of points that much of the Leave movement misses completely.
Exactly. Even just the smallest detail, like you walk down 100 metres from my house and you have a football team who are united on both sides of the divide. EU funding was given to a football club to unite both sides, both Catholic and Protestants during the Troubles. You know, it's these small details that were just missed throughout the entire campaign. And, you know, people like myself, we were watching on with devastation, you know.
Yeah.
And now that's coming from a country who still voted 56% Remain, you know.
Was it 56? I misspoke earlier. I thought it was 60. But where did the 44 come from then? Given that, from where I'm sitting, this was almost unavoidable. Certainly, this level of confusion was going to happen. It could have been more quickly and more comprehensively addressed and fixed, but there was no way we were going to avoid the confusion for a period. What did the 44 think was going to happen, do you think?
You know, the irony behind it all is that a big portion of that 44 were made up of unionist farmers, who are one of the biggest beneficiaries of EU money. And you know, I think unfortunately it goes back to what you talk about a lot, is, you know, this idea of not only fake news, but sort of, you know, just being unaware of the facts that are at hand.
Willfully unaware. Willfully. I mean, it takes some real effort to be still unaware of the facts.
That's true.
And there's a lot of people prepared to help, of course, with that effort by bleating on about blue passports and fish, although Michael Gove, again, as many people may have missed, has given an interview in the last 24 hours in which he's told Danish journalists that EU fleets, EU fishing boats will be free to continue fishing in British waters. So we've got our country back, we've got control of our fishing waters, and they're going to carry on being fished by European Union trawlers. And we've got our country back, but at the cost, quite possibly, and you're welcome to challenge this analysis, but no caller so far even wants to, everyone's suggesting the only possible answer to the borders is to move them to the ports, to make it a sea border, so that you will have, to all intents and purposes, a united Ireland. So we'll have got our country back by giving up the most blood-soaked corner of it. 12:46. And thank you, Grania. I'm not quite sure of the geography, but I'm sure I'm not the first. So I can't believe that it's a UK radio presenter giving Northern Ireland its first voice on the question of Brexit. I'm not. I'm just responding to Leo Varadkar's speech, which is slightly chilling, and wondering whether or not it reflects the broader view from the other side of the Irish Sea. It was 66-34, was it? Or 56-44? Oh, OK, no, I was just doing my sums wrong. Or I was doing them right. Someone's corrected me incorrectly. That's amazing, scintillating radio right there. But he's made this long list of things where there's no clarity, and Ireland obviously has even more interest than the rest of the European Union in knowing what is going to happen, what it's going to look like. And you sense he can't quite believe it. And nor can I, and nor can you. Let's find out what Owen in Bristol thinks. Owen, what would you like to say?
Hiya, James.
Hello, mate.
Well, I'm an Irish man living in England, so I've spent the last year trying to explain to friends and family in Ireland the arguments for Brexit. Obviously, I was a Remainer myself.
Why, obviously?
Yeah. Why would you not be? But I've got friends here that voted. Well, exactly. I mean, the only arguments I can really come up with to tell them are the fish, bent bananas, and border control.
I think they're changing their mind about border control at the moment. If you look at the front, I think the Mail's gone for it again today. Get to airport 3 hours early. Border chaos hits holidaymakers. Control is chaos now, so we don't talk about border control anymore because control means chaos, and we wanted that.
Yeah, well, that was inevitable. We knew that was coming, didn't we?
You did, I did. I sometimes wonder whether we're living in parallel universes to some of our friends and neighbours. What do the Irish people say to you? Because how does it look?
It's complete bewilderment. I mean, nobody in Ireland thought this was going to happen in a million years. And again, they don't understand the arguments for it. I've not seen a lot on the news over here about how the Irish economy is doing at the moment, but there's a huge economic boom again in Dublin.
It does follow a fairly big bust, so you can't necessarily use that as evidence of European Union brilliance.
No, absolutely. But the busts featured hugely in the news here. The boom hasn't so much.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, and part of the argument, part of the UKIP argument was that a lot of these European nations are failing economies when the evidence shows that they're bouncing back.
Yes, well, not just bouncing back, we're bottom now in terms of GDP.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Well, you can't keep saying there you go. I don't want to go. I was hoping you'd help me. I
was hoping you'd help me, James.
Oh, crikey. Come on.
Just trying to explain these arguments. I mean, it's the problem with filter bubbles and echo chambers. Is these arguments are being made with people who agree we're all preaching to a choir, aren't we?
Well, how do we know this isn't an echo chamber, though? Maybe there's some really brilliant arguments for why it's going to be great. They just can't make them yet, or we're just not hearing them.
I'm willing to listen to them. Where are
so
they?
Am I. My phone lines are always open.
Yeah.
So here's an example. The loudest voices are those who stand to lose the most handouts. So someone's gone to the trouble of writing that down and texting it and pressing send, and all you have to do is Google which areas receive the most subsidies from the European Union and then compare it to where the largest Leave votes were. And the loudest voices, the people that are going to lose the most handouts are the parts of this country, the parts of the mainland that actually received the most subsidies from the European Union, places like Cornwall and areas of the northeast. It's just unbelievable, this disconnect between reality and opinion.
Yeah. The farmers, and are they now going to have to compete with American farmers?
Some of the farmers are already thinking of opening up productions, opening up plants in Poland, so that they can continue selling into the European Union. That was reported in the Financial Times last week. It's an astonishing turnaround in the course of our lifetime. The Republic of Ireland, where my biological mother had to flee to come here and have me. So backwards was their attitude with regard to sex and religion and all of those things. Heard that unionist caller earlier, I don't know if you were listening, describing the Republic as being the progressive, forward-looking, modern country, and the rest of the mainland Britain being whatever the opposite of progressive, forward-looking and modern is. That's an astonishing thing to have happened in 40 years.
Yeah. It is, but it's happening, and I think this is what people aren't seeing, really, isn't it? And it's not being reported in the right-wing press.
Well, I guess they can't report it because reporting it is denying it, and sometimes it becomes so irresistible that you can't actually deny it anymore. It's like, for example, trying to claim that Leo Varadkar doesn't know what he's talking about. Just go on one more time. Oh, and take care. This is so important. I'm sorry if I've offended you and alienated you and upset you over the course of the last year and a bit by showing people who hold the same views and have the same relationship with knowledge that you have, how wrong that has been. I'm sorry if sometimes we've been a little bit gleeful in highlighting the idiocy. There shouldn't be any Schadenfreude involved in finding the victim of a confidence trick and being charged with explaining to them that they've been conned. Unfortunately, they're going to turn around and get angry with you, not with the person that's conned them. There has to come a point. This is the Prime Minister of Ireland saying stuff about our country that no British politician is really saying in public at the moment.
Your jobs and your economy, the border, the rights of EU citizens, the rights of cross-border workers, research funding, trade, agriculture, energy, our fisheries, aviation, EU funding, tourism, public services, the list goes on.
The list goes on. And what's on the other side of this divide? I can't even do the jokes anymore. Even fish isn't funny anymore because Michael Gove said no, obviously we're going to have to carry on letting EU trawlers fish our waters because, well, A, it would be suicidal not to in an economic term because what are they going to stop us from doing? And B, we haven't got the plant. We haven't got the infrastructure to even flipping peel the fish or whatever it is you do. Scale them. We haven't got the plant. All right, we'll build them then. What with? Jonathan's in Guildford. Jonathan, what would you like to say? Come on. Come on, you're going to fly, swim against the tide. Tell the rest of us why we're wrong.
No. I'm afraid I'm going to have to say you're right.
Oh, God.
And here's the worst. No. It's a lot more depressing than that, James. I've been. No. It's a whole lot more. That's the worst thing. It's a whole lot more depressing than you even think about. It's not that actually people don't give a monkeys. And here's the truth. I've been travelling to Northern Ireland 1986. Yeah. Times of the Troubles. I was working across community. I'm a singer, and I was working with Catholics and Protestants. I'm an opera singer, so we were going into schools trying to do cross-community work. When I came back to England, I've been doing it for years and years and years, going back twice a year. And what I find is that people here in Great Britain, here's the worst thing, particularly Brexiteers, they don't care about Ireland, all right? That's it.
Or Northern Ireland.
Particularly Northern Ireland. Yeah. And in fact, I remember specifically, in the 90s, I came back and there was a woman in our church from Belfast. She got up to do a reading and a guy turned to me, this is in a church, and he said, I don't know why we have to have people like that reading. There are plenty of people from our own, and I don't even understand what she's saying anyway. Now, that was from our own in a church context, and I just went, and I just thought, I don't even know what to say. I'm part Irish. And I turned to them in a service and I said, that kind of speak, I don't want to hear you say ever again. But this is the truth about the Brexiteers. They don't actually, in general, and this is a general statement because there will be people that do care, but in general, I find that people are not interested. If they could get rid of the carbuncle of Northern Ireland as far as they're concerned, that would be great.
And yet it is, to give it its full title is the Conservative and Unionist Party.
Yeah, absolutely. But look, I'm sorry to say that this is actually quite a depressing thought.
It is.
I've been listening to your show, and I've listened to people from Northern Ireland, and I've got friends in Bangor, I've got friends in Omagh, and I think actually the news is, and they know this instinctively, that the water that divides them, that it might as well be Russia. It might as well be, because the people are never going to go across there. They don't care about the people that are going to cross there. And if, in fact, we could cut them off with a bit of this, a bit of that, waterboard, who cares?
Well, I hope you're wrong, actually. I know I say that a lot at the moment. The only thing I say more often than I hope you're wrong is that I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. It's just kiss of death for a radio presenter. All of these figures we've got, all high-fiving around the place, all the people listening. Next milestone for me is going to be 1 million, but it's all going to go off a cliff because I've turned into a bloke who hopes he's wrong instead of being a bloke who's sure he's right. When you're sure you're right, you can do this with your eyes shut. When you hope you're wrong, you're setting up all sorts of existential dramas for the future. So I hope you're wrong on this occasion, Jonathan, and I hope I'm wrong as well, because I think you're right. That's it for... That was quite pithy, wasn't it? Quite...